When did you realize that someone you were cool with your whole life was actually really messed up? Story 1. I had a 5th grade teacher that was awesome. He had high energy, talked about partying, and the girls that he'd bring home on the weekends. I thought he was so cool until I got old enough to realize bragging about hookups to a room of 11-year-olds is weird. Story 2. I had a cousin a couple years older than me who was killed in a car accident in his mid-20s. My younger sister didn't want to go to the funeral, and I tried to guilt-trip her because her excuse was that she was spending the weekend with her boyfriend. A month after the funeral, she told me that our deceased cousin had molested her when she was younger. Story 3. My mom worked with disabled kids and had a good friend and colleague there who was one of the caretakers of kids living there permanently. He was a great teacher, husband, and loving father. For almost a decade, every week she would drive this kid to the psychologist because they suspected he was abused and that he could use it. But he never told the psychologist anything. Then one day police starts an investigation because one of the night guard was giving massages to the kids. People start digging. Puzzle pieces come together. Turns out the teacher caretaker, I don't know the English word, has been abusing the boy for years and years. And because when my mom first brought him to the psych, he came along, the kid never dared to say the truth to the psych. After this, my mom got a lot more vigilant and actually caught 2 more pedos during the rest of her career working in that school. She never again gave the benefit of the doubt, never again thought, oh, he is such a kind person, he will never do that. Remember, abusers are usually people you love and trust. Story 4. Close friend of mine when we got drunk and wanted to drive around 800 miles to kill his cousin. Few days after this event, he confided in me that the cousin molested him as a child. Don't blame him for that. Also, don't even blame him for the amount of illicit narcotics he consumes. The man has demons to kill. Edit to those saying I should help him. I've tried for a long time, convinced him to enter rehab twice, got him to see a psychologist. He is on antidepressants. Because of that, he just keeps on doing what he's doing. And as someone who knows, quite frankly, all the grisly details, I again don't blame him. He started his own home brewery recently, which makes him happy, and it's a good brew, so I'll leave it at that. I also fully agree with those saying the cousin should be killed. Pedophilia is one of those unforgiven sins, and pedophiles should die a slow and violent death at the hands of the abused, in my opinion, with no repercussions for the abused. Story 5. This cool, laid-back Brazilian guy went to 7th grade with me. I live in Peru, and Spanish and Portuguese are mildly mutually intelligible, so we had a lot of fun as he playfully learned Spanish and had a carte blanche whenever it came to actually understanding school subjects. We all liked him, but him and his family missed living in Brazil. So they went back the following year. We stayed friends on Facebook and had post jiu-jitsu tournament pics every now and then. Years later, a schoolmate found a Brazilian news article about him beating a woman for refusing to have with him on a date. He almost killed the poor girl. There was a following article about him having beaten his disabled brother for years. Story 6. This guy was always a little weird, but we got along well. And then on a break from college while I was at my parents' house, his mugshot showed up on the local news as a person of interest in a child pornography case. I still remember my dad asking, "Isn't that a friend of yours?" The next day, I ran into a mutual friend who gave me a few revolting details about the case. And then it was like all of the weird stuff from over the years immediately summed up in my head, and I realized just how messed up the guy really was. Story 7, not my experience, but my husband's. He and his brother were friends with this guy through elementary to high school. I even saw him in home movies on VHS. Guy and his friend raped and murdered a young teen in her own home, and now he's in jail for life. Story 8, we weren't really close, but a guy who was in my friend group in high school is now in prison for molesting his stepdaughter and possession of child. We were all messed up when we found out we'd been friends with a pedo creep. Story 9, I found out in my 20s that an older family friend of mine who was always a real laid-back, cool dude has essentially been a functioning heroin addict since before I was born. Edit, he's still one of my favorite people, though. Story 10, best friend's mother was a drug addict. Didn't register as a child. As an adult, Jesus, she really upped her life, and it's a miracle her son turned out okay. Story 11, there was this one guy in my friend group who I always thought was kind of weird, but his house was one of the few spots a large group of teenagers could hang out at late into the night. First red flag was him trying to hook up with multiple mutual friends male despite having a girlfriend, making a lot of homophobic comments. He ended up knowingly giving multiple people STDs. My best friend borrowed the guy's phone, found CP in his search history, told basically everyone we knew. Most of our friend group stopped talking to him for obvious reasons. A few people still hung out with him even with that knowledge. Story 12, a guy who I knew was a thief, but as far as I knew never stole from me or my family. We had been best friends since we were 12. We even went to prom together. I invited him over when we were 19 or 20, and he said he was going to use the bathroom, but I never heard the door close. I left the den and looked, and he was rooting through my backpack. I was in college, our eyes locked, and he walked into the bathroom. Neither of us mentioned it, but I didn't see him again for like 5 years. We hung out every day for a while. Then he disappeared again. We are in our early 30s now and have finally reconnected. He has a very successful career, and he told me he's changed. I hope it's true because I love that guy. Story 13, this one girl I went to church camp with. She was really fun and nice, and we exchanged social media at the end of the summer. I got home and added her on Instagram, only to find that she posts nudes, smokes, drinks, and does crack. We were 14 at the time. Edit, in no way am I making this comment to criticize her. If you or someone you know can relate to this, please talk to someone about it and seek treatment. It's okay to need help. I still connect with her, and thankfully she seems to be doing a bit better now. Story 14, a guy I knew in high school turned out to be an incredibly abusive boyfriend. I never dated him, but he beat one of his girlfriends so badly she landed in the hospital. Another guy I knew in middle school ended up getting convicted for raping his underage cousin. I stayed away from them after I learned those facts. There's a lot of I can handle, but both of those were far too much for me. Story 15, ex-wife announced when she was 3 months pregnant that she was into group and was going in that weekend. She hoped I'd be cool with it and join her, but instead followed through with destroying the marriage by following through with her plan. Turns out she was cheating from day one. She's a philanderer to this day. Story 16, one of my best friends since HS, his mom, dad, and both sisters all had mental health issues, but he seemed to be relatively fine in that regard. In his mid-30s, he began having mental episodes that progressively got worse. Myself and some other friends tried to help, and at first it was working, until he decided to stop taking his meds, which led to a severe breakdown. During this breakdown, he threatened his landlord with a gun, then went back to his house and shot both of his dogs, which he loved like family. This event led to him being kicked out of his house. The landlord did not press charges and being arrested for multiple animal abuse crimes. That's when we realized just how serious his issues were. After dealing with and moving past his legal issues, going to therapy and getting back on his meds, myself and some other friends got him get back on his feet by helping him find a place to live and employment at another friend's business. Things are going fine for a while until he had another episode and completely went off the radar. He quit going to work, loaded up his car, and left the house where he was renting a room, not to be heard from for several months. He finally resurfaced in the news for shooting someone non-fatal during a dispute, of which we have still not learned the details of. We did learn that he had been homeless, living at a roadside campsite several miles south of the city during the time we had not seen or heard from him. He's been in jail since then, almost a year now, and still has not had his day in court. It's a really bad situation because he needs to mental health care rather than being locked up in jail. But there's not much any of us can do at this point. Story 17, my grandfather. My mother always described how good of a father he was, and he seemed like the nicer grandparent when he was still alive, always calming down the situation my grandmother played up, giving advice and wisdom. When he died, we said he probably immediately went to heaven, and as a kid, I genuinely believed it. Found out recently, a good 15 years later, that when my aunt was assaulted at 13, he kept in contact with the guy who assaulted her for years after the fact. He knew about it, just acted like it didn't happen. Disturbed me greatly. Story 18, I had a very close friend from the age of 9 onward. He became a teacher and was very passionate about teaching. One day, he raped a 12-year-old student at knife point. When a search warrant was executed on his house afterwards, there were hard drives filled with child pornography, including pictures of kids from the soccer team he coached. He went to prison for 10 years. Story 19, my mom's adopted brother is younger than me. So, growing up, I always saw him as a little cousin. Was a real funny and energetic guy and would hang out on family holidays, and whenever I visited my GMA, I went off the military, and I found out that he was sent to jail for hitting a guy with a skateboard in a fight. Supposedly the guy pulled a knife, but got rid of it before the cops came, so my uncle went to jail for assault with a deadly weapon. Did a few years in prison, and when he got out, he was an aspiring rapper with a great outlook on life, trying to better himself. He was out for 2 weeks before he was arrested for raping a 13-year-old. Found out that he actually went to jail the first time for robbing someone at gunpoint. Grew up really close to a cousin, and we naturally grew apart. As we got older, saw him at my sister's wedding, and talked about hanging out again. That never happened because he got arrested for distributing child not long after that. It's had a major impact on my ability to trust people. How could someone I spent so much time with have these crazy desires? And I never saw any sign of it. Story 20, I wasn't really cool with this person, more tolerated his annoying behavior because he was on the wrestling team with me. But then he came out that he was like super racist, like really, really racist, that guy. When a close friend stole $2,000 from their parents, and worked out when I was doing a loan to then blamed it on me. So I didn't have an alibi. Luckily, I was online with friends and could prove it, so his parents didn't take legal action. Haven't spoke to him since, and last I heard, he was wanted for possession and assault. Story 21, my friends and brother to me. I used to be the cool HS rebel with a serious attitude problem. I smoked and drank, and people thought I was so cool. Then I robbed a liquor store and spent the next 11 years in prison. What's worse is I ruined my best friend's life too by strong-arming him into robbing the liquor store. My brother used to idolize me. I protected him from my dad and bullies in school. I was so cool to him because I defied everyone. He thinks I'm a sad, pathetic loser now and doesn't believe I reformed. As for me, my second cellmate, he used to be so cool, but now that I'm out and can reflect, he's just really scary. Dude was a straight-up future serial killer. No remorse for anything he did. All the time I did with him, he was and my friend. Story 22, when I was in high school, I was also in theater. I was 15 when I joined. There were two guys. One my age was really nice, and one 18-year-old who I at the time thought was nice as well. Most of his friends were 15-year-old girls, and he was making weird comments. I was naive and thought he was great. He was a good actor. When he started trying to get me alone, though, and trying to flirt with me, I got creeped out and took my distance. He later started dating a 14-year-old, and he later raped and abused her. I am lucky I realized he was weird on time. To any young girl reading this, a grown man being interested in you at that age isn't okay. You aren't mature for your age. He is a predator. Please don't get into a relationship with him. Story 23, I used to attend and later worked at a Boy Scout camp. There was a staff member there that was well known, ANS, generally super well liked by both staff and campers. He was covered in tattoos and piercings, but was still liked by even the super conservative people that would come there from time to time. Just generally a likable and fun person. He was arrested for child pornography a couple years ago. Apparently had thousands of images and videos. Story 24 had a crush on a guy in high school. Even made out with him once. He ended up murdering his girlfriend, stuffing her in his trunk, and dumping her body a couple 100 miles away. Good God, never let a nice set of abs distract me again after that. Story 25, my neighbor lifelong friend, when I followed them on Facebook. Nothing like seeing your close friend posting about how they wish you didn't exist, you shouldn't get the same rights as everyone else. Story 26, well, last weekend, while camping, my friend told me about a voice he has that threatens to kill him sometimes. And long story short, we may have figured out he has low-key schizophrenia. Story 27, a childhood friend that came to hang out when a mutual friend of ours visited after living out of state for a couple of years. He showed up clearly on something which wasn't really all that usual, but he started straight making up stories about his dad working for the Irish mob, and he just would not leave when it was 2 a.m. and I wanted to go to bed. I ended up having to get our mutual to physically put him in my car and drive him home so we could get some sleep. Story 28, I am a Turkish Jew and was living in London at the time. Had this Danish friend. At some point she said this, you know what, you're really cool even though you're a Turk, probably because you're not Muslim. Yeah, that racist bullshit. Story 29, friend's mom was a crack addict. Not entirely unusual in my neighborhood, TBH. He always had different uncles coming in and out of the house, though. I never saw him talk to any. Hit me hard later on that those weren't uncles, and mom was funding her habit. Story 30, when my former best friend stole a chainsaw and weed eater from my parents. I knew about some bad things he had done, but he had been my friend since grade school, so I overlooked them. Story 31, we were catching up on families, and he mentioned his son's latest brush with the law. The son had been convicted of assault, involving an attack on a woman unknown to him who had been walking on the beach after sunset. I inquired how he was coping with the reality of his son's transgressions, if it changed his regard for him, and wasn't that a difficult conflict to manage. He explained that it wasn't difficult because the rape wasn't a big deal, because the victim was an old lady not likely a virgin. I was astounded, not only by his attitude, but by the fact that I had been friends for decades with someone who held such an egregious view. Story 32, last year, I moved in with a childhood friend who's a year younger than me, but I'm 2 years ahead of him in uni due to starting school at young. So the point is he was like my younger brother, good-looking boy who is well-dressed, but I guess he's a real narcissist. Over the years I hear glimpses of stories about messed up things he did but shrug it off. After we moved in together, I realized he did not care about anything or anyone at all apart from his image. Had skip rent payments, not buy food and so on. Funny enough, always had money for the club. Let pass hoping head change, then realized he isn't gonna. Started buying food for myself, only because I obviously couldn't afford food for both us with my allowance. And then I noticed him start to spend less days at home and more at his cousins. Only for it to turn out he had skipped rent payment for 3 months, and the landlord was now looking for him and looking at me wondering why my roommate isn't paying rent. After landlord informed me about the whole thing, I waited for him to come back and confronted him one night, only for it turned into an argument about how selfish I am and so on. It became very heated, and he tried to fight me, but me considering I'm older and not a violent person, I shrugged it off and just kept it cool. He moved back home to another town days later, and I found a new roommate. A month ago, I found out he attempted to rape a girl, and I'm honestly not surprised. I had completely cut him off days after that argument, and to hear about the rape thing made a lot of sense given how much he had in his head that every female desires him. I just hope he gets help cause he clearly needs it, and it's a shame to see him go down that way. Story 33. When I was growing up, my parents became involved with Amway MLM. They had noble intentions to get money to spend time with us, but it backfired. They were so involved with it that they were gone 4 nights of the week, and we never took a vacation without them voluntarily spending time at meetings. It wasn't until I had kids that I realized how much of my childhood they'd missed. I also became so used to solving things by myself before anyone noticed that it ties my insides up when someone offers to help. Story 34. One of my best friends to this day was the one for me. She was always an ambitious hard worker, great student, smart, popular, all that. We were in the same class from 2nd grade all through high school, but we weren't ever really friends until we both went to the same college and were both dating people back in our hometown. So we spent many long trips talking and became close. Eventually, she became the sister I never had. Then she got dumped by a guy she thought was going to propose, and a couple weeks later, her first serious boyfriend, different one. They broke up long ago, but remained very good friends, died. She did not take it well. The cracks first started to show as she started dating shittier and shittier dudes. Soon, she wouldn't even tell me about them because she knew what I'd say. We didn't live in the same town anymore, but kept in touch. I knew she was off, but thought it was depression. Then her spelling, grammar, and word choice went on her texts. She was always a very good writer, and now she didn't make sense. Then she lost her job that she'd had for years. Then she lost her house and was couch surfing. Then she was basically squatting in an uninsulated shed with a sleeping bag and a Coleman lantern for heat light. I knew she did drugs from time to time. What I didn't know was she had tweaked her back freshman year of college, been prescribed Oxy, and had been keeping a pill habit under the radar for nearly a decade. A few shakeups broke her balancing act and sent her tumbling. I didn't even invite her to my wedding when I got married because she was just gone. But the story does have a happy ending. She's almost 3 years sober, engaged to a seemingly decent dude, and has a baby due in a few months. It was quite eye-opening to see someone close fall apart like that. Story 35. My parents had a pretty close friend since I was a child that lived a block away from our house and would often have us over for dinner, spend holidays with us, that sort of thing. He was an OBGYN. About 2 years ago, we found out through local news that he raped a girl in his home office. Apparently, he would practice abortions there, as it was illegal in my country at the time, and rape them while they were unconscious. The police went to his place and found a bunch of guns there, too. Story 36. In my 50s, I realized everyone was right that my sister Wassie's awful. I always said she's not like that. She betrayed me by lying to everyone that after caring for her mom with dementia for 10 years, and while she never called once, she told anyone who would listen that I stole all her mom's money and I was committing fraud. She was going to make sure I was going to jail. She told anyone who would listen that our mom was horrible. When my husband was fighting for his life in a hospital, she took over as executor of my mom's estate. My mom didn't want her to handle it. She never changed mom's bills to her address, but didn't pay the mortgage. I was freaking out because the bank would call me about the missed payments and no one's siblings and attorney would believe me. That she let the house go into foreclosure several times. She wouldn't answer my calls. She lost her house, and I didn't have her address. I lived 900 miles away. I had no fight left in me. The house sold, and when money was distributed, my inheritance check bounced. The lawyer didn't believe me. I called my backstabber SIL that action in our state is a felony, and I wasn't going to mess around. She sent me a money order right away. I was glad all of the hassles were over. I sent a letter to her attorney pointing out all of her lies with proof, and in it a letter to Sis that said I never wanted to talk to her again unless she went to AA and gave me a public apology. Story 37. A few years back was on a new birth control pill that ended up not working for me and got pregnant. Tried working it out with the donor only to find out that my sister had been him the entire time despite knowing we were dating and I was pregnant. If she see this, she'll know it's about her. And all I can say is you. Story 38. They stole a booster seat from a restaurant and kept it as a trophy because they thought they didn't get polite service, no kids, plenty of money, educated, they just wanted to hurt the restaurant. Story 39. I was friends with a guy for 16 years. We had a lot in common as we were both into the outdoors. We would hang out together with our spouses and even traveled a little together. All was fine until he got me a job with him working for his parents. They were so kind and generous. They treated me very well. That's when I learned my friend he lied about everything to his parents, lied about being overwhelmed with work, that's why I was hired, lied about money, he pocketed it any way he could. I tried telling his parents about a little of it, and it ruined my relationship with them. I think they had an idea about how he was, but were in denial. Story 41, rather sad part about growing up and on into adulthood, is that you realize a lot of the really interesting, original, creative, eccentric people you picked up along the way begin to devolve into people with serious enough mental health problems that they are constantly suffering and never really fit in the world. Well, I think of my two best friends like this who, by the way, I worshipped when we became friends. They were so charismatic and fascinating. They have found themselves in their 40s, single and struggling, unemployed, and in need of a lot of support from mental health professionals. They picked bad relationships. They felt they didn't have to work within the rules of work and lost jobs, or were never really promoted or supported. They were the royalty among us when we were all young and single, and poor because they were thriving when everyone was like them, doing their own thing, full of energy. They knew how to do really well when little was expected or needed of them. It's great to be unconventional, but life is a game and it has rules. You need to play by those rules, at least to some extent, to get the prizes: healthy long-term relationships, satisfying long-term employment, and, thus, money, long, stable relationships with friends. I've seen plenty of eccentrics succeed, but none of them were the shining stars these friends once were. They just wouldn't or couldn't compromise, but they also feel they can't be happy without the prizes. Story 41, my old homie has severe anger at home to his family, but is completely normal to other people, and I wouldn't have known if I didn't see holes in the wall and found out he went to a mental hospital. Story 42, didn't really know this person my whole life, but I knew her for 4 years of my childhood. She lived next door to my family, and my parents would hire her to babysit me, my sister, and my brother. I didn't really realize anything was wrong when I was a kid, but thinking back to it, a lot of the games she played with us, or with me anyways, were oddly. She also brought a pornographic video to our house once and showed it to me. I was somewhere between the ages of 6 and 10 when all of this happened, and she was in her late teens. Be careful who you trust to watch your children, and remember that not all predators are men. Story 43, my cousin. One of the first people in my generation of family to get us together, always into cars and cool stuff that I liked as a younger cousin. Got his degree and became a police officer. I always counted him as one of the good ones, eventually found a great wife, and they adopted a really nice daughter together. Turns out he most certainly wasn't one of the good ones when my mom called and told me he was arrested by the FBI for child and abuse. He had been posing on FB as a 16-year-old and extorting nude from other teens, all while abusing his daughter. It's wild to have someone go from a role model to not caring what happens to them as they rot in jail. Probably not going to go well for him, being a pedo and cop. Story 44, I was in a group of 3 best friends, me, C, and J. We were suburban tween Catholic schoolgirls in the same class, hung out every single day in 7th grade. C devised an entire plan with some other kids in our group of friends to lure me into the woods and bash my head with a rock. They were all just so edgy and hardcore and thought that I was too goody for their group. J and I were not speaking at the time, but she winded up sprinting home and getting a hold of me to warn me. I remember not believing her at the time because I was young and mad at her. Welp, 5 minutes later my phone rang, and it was C and the other kids inviting me over there. It's been a very long time since then. They're all pretty up people still. I winded up running into one of the other girls of the group last year at a mutual friends party. She broke down crying and blubbering apologies over and over again. I've forgiven them because they very obviously have some serious mental issues within themselves that have nothing to do with me. I've remained friends with Jay over the years, and am still very grateful for her doing the right thing on what would have been a very dark day. Story 45, at the end of last year, I realized how many times my mom has meddled in my life when she thought I wasn't going the way she thought it would. Someone I was really interested in my early 20s. She talked them out of me while I wasn't around. She was a really sweet person, and I liked her a lot. Instead, I ended up with a psycho who left after our daughter was born. That is just one instance out of many times my mother used intense manipulation on a person, usually me, to help my life, because it wasn't going the way she thought it should go, and she still has no idea she's done anything wrong. Currently trying to fix my life from the last time she meddled in it. It's not been good, but I'm almost through this mess. Story 46, when the local paper ran a story about them for being found guilty of possessing child pornography. We went to high school together. This guy was good friends with my best friend at the time. She had a child in the age range that he had pictures of. Had actually been charged with the crime months before any of us found out about it, because he was free until his trial when the story was run. Story 47, a member of my family that I considered the closest person to me on earth, helped her through so much, gave her time, money, support, AMD, unconditional love, then my mom died. I just didn't have it in me to do all that for her and try to lean on her for support. Well, I got dropped really fast, started telling all my other people. Her treated me like it was terrible, so hurtful. She's been doing other stuff to try and hurt me, but it doesn't have the same effect now I see her for what she is. She's still in my life, but if I have to go no contact, sometimes it makes me sad I gave all those years to someone who thinks it's okay to treat people like that. Story 48, when we were kids, we were both abused physically. I only saw his dad once, but I knew at least some of the horrible he went through. We were best friends from like 6 years old. Around the time of high school, he started to get insanely bad about bullshitting and bragging. We had a tight group of friends. We both had girlfriends who were from our friend circle going back years. But this guy would brag and boast about all that he got in threesome. And when his girl wasn't around, it was very up, and I had to tell him to knock it off a few times because his GF was my friend too. We all knew he was completely full of, and we were with him 90 of the time anyways. Well, it goes so bad his girl dumped him. Then I couldn't stand it anymore either and stopped hanging out with him. Then he joined the army, and we all hoped it would fix his attitude a little. Skip ahead about 15 years. He's married and has 4 kids and moved back to town with his wife. He wants to meet up and reconnect, so I agree, and while he seems still the same guy, the bullshit is at a minimum. We have a few good times hanging out, then I find out his whole life is rented. House, car, sofa, TV, kitchen table, bed, even his kids' bikes are on a rent-to-own scheme. Then he starts replacing things with bigger and bigger stuff. The 60-inch TV becomes a 90-inch TV, and this is in 2005-ish. Then the bullshit starts up heavier and heavier. My wife doesn't feel comfortable, particularly around his wife. She can't put her finger on it, but she decided she is done hanging out. Now his kids are amazing. His oldest is incredibly bright, like the kind of kid who doesn't want to watch TV and spends all her time tinkering with electronics and stuff. She was literally the smartest kid I had ever met. All his kids were so well-behaved and smart and kind, but by this point I can't take the bullshitting anymore, so I stop hanging out with him. For 2 years we don't hear word from them. Then I find out through his mother that he and his wife both were arrested and convicted for molesting the children. His mom was taking care of them, but there was a lot of DHS and doctor involvement. Apparently, it was a long-time thing, and his wife was involved with it as well. It killed me to hear it. We all knew he was up because of the excessive attention-seeking behavior. But those kids were so special, and he hurt them. Dude was my best friend since I could remember, and he grew up to be a monster of the highest degree. Story 49, not me, but my older siblings, one of their closest friends, suddenly ended up in prison, which was very concerning. Turns out it was because he was abusing his daughter. They all cut off all contact with him after that. Story 50 was best friends with a guy for like 7 years. Not many days we weren't together. When his father passed away, he inherited about $75,000, moved away like 20 minutes away, almost entirely quit talking to and hanging out with me, started living with some people he barely knew, didn't pay any rent, and blew through the $75K in less than a year. Anyways, I did hang out with him and his new friend a few times, and anytime he would go to the bathroom or wherever, these people would tell me about all that he was doing, sending their GFs pics, walking in on them and their GFs having and trying to have a threesome, hitting on underage girls, and then sleeping with women who way too intoxicated to fully know what was going on. And apparently while he and I were friends before the $75K, he was doing this, I basically became the person these people would confide in. After I heard about the underage girls and the drunk women stuff, I confronted him, told him he was a piece of human, a bad friend, and worst of all, he was a predator. Told him if I ever have proof of him sleeping with underage girls and basically raping drunk women, I would contact the police. 2 days later, he moves away. No one knows where he is now. Story 51, not my whole life, but I became friends with a guy for my new job. We'd get a beer sometimes, and I had him over for a barbecue a few times. A few months later, he got arrested for punching a girl, and it became a pretty big local story. In the process of being prosecuted, a bunch of other girls, like about 10 or so, came forward saying he had threatened them. A girl he had dated briefly said he had given her some serious bruises while having. They also found a huge collection of upskirt photos and all the equipment he used to take them. He had been expelled from high school for pulling up girls' skirts. Yuck.